Hare Krishna, everyone. We've had a little bit of a technical difficulty. When we started our going live, something went wrong and it appeared on YouTube and didn't appear on Facebook. So please bear with me while I bring Tapan Mishra, our guest speaker today, who's going to be talking with us, I should say, about the first purpose of ISKCON. Please bear with me while I get him back onto the stream. So I'm just going to be going off for a second and be there shortly. So folks, devotees, Hare Krishna, I've sent him now the link and I'm hoping that he will get reconnected very shortly. Not quite sure what happened, but just to recap, my name is Pancharatna Das and I'm here in Mayapur where we're trying to stay safe in the midst of this global pandemic. And one of the ways is doing things like this by broadcasting the seminars and the talks and the interviews and so on that we might have otherwise enjoyed in person. So now we're doing this through these live streams, and we've been conducting the series on the 7 purposes of ISKCON. So it looks like we've got, yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay.
Hare Krishna,
there you are.
Okay.
All right. But we've got a little bit of an echo. I think. Do you hear an echo?
Yes, but it's manageable, Prabhu.
Okay. Oh, good. But I don't know our audience. Do you have a speaker going on, or is it me?
I don't hear an echo from your end.
You don't hear an echo. I hear an echo. Well, okay. I'm not going to do much talking. So hopefully, I don't want to get into too many technical issues here. We'll take all our time doing that.
Right.
Anyway, I do hear. Let's see if I can do something. But I'm going to just. Okay, that helped. But don't, I'm going to ask you to talk very soon. I'm going to introduce you first, very briefly. Tapan Mishra, my friend, my neighbor practically. We're just a few houses away. And someone that I've enjoyed being in the association of in so many different ways. He has so many responsibilities working with the GBC in different areas as director in different activities, but the one that kind of really relates to this topic of today, the first purpose of ISKCON, is his role as the executive director in the ISKCON Ministry for Education. So we are going to ask you some questions, and we're going to ask you to help us to go deeper into this first purpose of ISKCON. So I will start off with a general question. I mean, this has to do with just from the perspective of an organization. We're talking about the purposes of ISKCON, how it was incorporated, how it was legally established. So in that respect, what do you think? Well, what's the scope of this? I mean, what's its relevance? Is it just something that had to be put into a legal document and, you know, you've got to put something in there and so that was it? Or is this got some more relevance? So now unmute yourself and take it away. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutle. Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you, Pancharatna Prabhu. So, in order to answer your question, which is from an incorporation point of view, these 7 purposes in general, what is their scope and relevance? Well, yes, I believe this is an incorporation document, and many of us who are in business would relate to it, that when you're incorporating a business, you must give certain purposes, objectives of the business. So to that degree, yes, it is something that had to be put in. Yeah. But the fact that it comes from His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada makes it more than just what had to be legally put in. If we were to look at these 7 purposes, and if we were to look at what His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada did before putting these 7 purposes in the form of reference to 2 other important documents, one being the Constitution of Iscon, which is another legal document, and prior to that, the League of Devotees Prospectus, which was established in 1953, one would gather from that that this was a result of immense meditation. It was a result of immense meditation, not just for the purpose of putting something in for legal relevance, but allowing all of us to be able to answer that very most important question when somebody asks us, okay, hey, you are a member of ISKCON, or you're part of ISKCON. What does it do? What does it offer? What is its purpose? So it's much more beyond that. But just those 7 purposes that are given allow us to address such questions when coming from our well-wishers, family members, somebody on the street who sees us with this tilak and our attire and says, hey, I've heard about you guys, but what do you do? So these 7 purposes are a good start. At the same time, we must also understand that they are like succinct statements which then need to be further elaborated with the help of other documents, but most importantly, by the help of meditation on the books that Srila Prabhupada put together and the literature, immense literature. So that's, in my opinion, an overall context in which they have to be read. We should, as has been discussed by many devotees on these series of seminars, we should all try to be very familiar with them, even know them, learn them. But at the same time, we must also understand that it doesn't stop here. There's much unpacking to be done. And I've noticed that these interviews that you're undertaking are helping the world of ISKCON to unpack them.
So I'm going to mute you just while we're talking. About the sequence, the order, the way that these purposes have been, there's 7 of them. Is there some significance to the sequence and the relevance of these different purposes as they're presented?
Well, how do I put it? All 7 of them are relevant. They weren't necessarily numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the document, but rather they were A, B, C, D, E, F. And most devotees, depending upon what service they perform, if they look at the purpose, as was also mentioned by Braj Bihari Prabhu in his first introductory seminar to these sessions, he mentioned depending upon what service we have, we may find one more relevant to us than the other. But if you were to just ask my personal opinion, having worked in the corporate sector, having looked at how vision and mission statements are structured, it seems like that the first one is a vision statement, something, a very broad statement, which then is further unpacked in the remaining 6, and then in the Constitution, a legal document, and then the books, and so on and so forth. And if you really read the first one, which I like to do at this point in time, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all peoples in the technique of spiritual life in order to check the imbalances of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world, it's a very, very loaded set of 4 sentences. Very loaded. It's a lifetime of work for thousands and hundreds of devotees, hundreds and thousands of devotees to be able to fulfill. Going back to your previous question, any founder would typically put very general statements like this, at least in the incorporation certificate or document. This is primarily done in order to ensure that the Secretary of the State, or in some jurisdictions, the Registrar of Societies or corporations, does not clamp down on the activity. When you keep it generic like this, it allows you to do many activities. So the first one, it seems to me to be like the vision statement, and the remaining, if we look at the details, sort of immediately help us achieve the first to some degree. So that's one way of looking at it, Prabhu.
The first purpose seems to have a lot of words related to education, and you're director in the Ministry of Education. So can you help us understand how you see this ISKCON in terms of as an educational institution, or as an educational mission, or is it broader, or just how do we relate to this concept of education, educating people, propagation? Because there's also these 2 words, propagating and educating. So help us unpack this, understand it a little bit better.
Well, let's start with the first word, education. And from what you described, I would say all of the above. Now, Prabhu, in terms of education per se, I mean, we are in a fairly chaotic world, and everybody's struggling to find out how to solve many problems. Most people would accept today that education is fundamental to a cultured society. You know, any sane man, any learned man, or even half-learned man would accept that education is fundamental to creating a cultured society. And Srila Prabhupada saw that. He saw that the whole Gaudiya Madhav Parampara, Vaishnava Parampara, saw that as well. So education is fundamental to a cultured society, and I feel that from the writings of Srila Prabhupada, there are several quotes. In few lectures, Prabhupada spoke very emphatically on this, and he said that ISKCON is fundamentally an educational movement. So education by itself is necessary, foundational, fundamental to a cultured society, and the formation of ISKCON and its the first purpose clearly indicate to us that ISKCON is fundamentally an educational movement. If you allow me, I could look at a relevant quote from Srila Prabhupada. This This goes back to several lectures, particularly in the 1973. But there is one in 1960. There is a quote where Prabhupada described. He said, "In my opinion, temples are centers for educating the public in spiritual values. And this is Prabhupada speaking, and I have a mission to organize all temples for that spiritual education." So when we see this in the context of the remaining 6 purposes, which includes, having centers, temples, publishing periodicals, etc. And in the context that the first is like a vision statement, it seems very, very important, Prabhu, this emphasis on education. There is another instance in 1973, I think it was probably during the travels of Prabhupada in the Oceania region, New Zealand, Australia, several places in universities, Prabhupada quoted. I like to read another one, very interesting. Prabhupada says, this is Krishna consciousness movement. It is a very scientific movement, authoritative movement. So our request is that you don't take this movement as something sentimental, religious faith. No, it's a very scientific, educational movement. So there are several more, but in being responsive to your question, I think that's why education is embedded in various purposes, and very emphatically it starts off, at least in the first purpose.
The first purpose also begins with systematically, and this is an interesting term. You've also mentioned that you've been in the corporate background, the corporate world in the past, and so on. Can you help us understand what Srila Prabhupada means by systematically propagating and educating and so on?
Prabhu, if we really look at the demographics that Srila Prabhupada wanted to address, it's a very wide demographics. Very wide demographics from the point of view of the age of people who come into ISKCON, the culture, the diversity that people join ISKCON from. So that's the material angle, if I may use. And also from the perspective of one's spiritual development, one's level of consciousness. And the word systematic brings various connotations to mind. The first is that if there is such a varied demographics that has to be catered to, has to be served, educated, engaged for systematic propagation, then we must have programs that cater to various levels of ages, cultural backgrounds, so on and so forth, but also fundamentally addressing the consciousness that different members may come from. This would require immense organization. It would require a very, very personal relationship between those who are doing the service of nurturing someone with those who are to be nurtured, those Krishna brings us in touch with. So, three keywords. One is the demographics is very wide, so it has to be catered to. So there is systematic endeavor needed there. For this, there must be an organization of our way of interacting with various members, a way of nurturing various members, and it has to be very, very intelligently organized, for which we require an organization. So that's where the GBC body, the various ministries, and in this context, let's say Ministry of Education and other ministries have to perform this service to come up with dynamic organization structures which will allow those who have to nurture, to interact with and care for the devotees that have to be taken care and the members who join us. And this is, Pancharatna Prabhu, this is just the sphere of those who become members of ISKCON. What to say of how much more we have to be careful and intelligent in order to organize ourselves for interaction with the larger world. That's another large effort by itself.
Just to pick up on something you said, because you mentioned different demographics, and one of the key words in this this vision is peoples, And it was pointed out by Conte Prabhu in one of our beginning when we launched this, how that term, not people, but peoples, indicates this concept of many different demographics, many different peoples from various backgrounds and so on that have to be addressed and taken care of. Now, what we are educating, because we have knowledge, we have techniques of spiritual life, and then we end up with an outcome. And I'm hoping that because you're in the field of education, that you might also help us understand how in this vision we have some of the education principles, where you have different kind of learning objectives, and Prabhupada talks about correcting the imbalance of values in life. So how do you understand that, the values in life? Help us expand on that.
So, Prabhu, in terms of values of life, Srila Prabhupada has helped us right at the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam in describing what is of real value to this life. And there's only one thing which is of real value to life, which is our relationship with Krishna. Pending that, there is an imbalance. Across his purports, across also the foundational documents, especially in the League of Devotees prospectus, Prabhupada specifically said, he said there's an imbalance. And he refers imbalance because so much of the energy today in the world, in the larger world, is focused on just the four things that most living entities do: eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, creating a secure environment for themselves. And he says the aspect of spiritual life is completely amiss. And unless the aspect of spiritual life, which according to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the only value is to establish a relationship, a long lost relationship with Lord Krishna is established, this balance will not come in. Now, from a point of view of consciousness, we may come, peoples, if I may use that word, may come from different cultures, they may come from different backgrounds, but from a spiritual analysis point of view, it will culminate into a certain level of consciousness, those who are influenced by one modes more than the others, right? Now, Srila Prabhupada gave us an educational process. He says, our educational process is essentially we must regularly engage in reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and the books that Srila Prabhupada has given. If we start reading these books in the association of learned devotees, then the members themselves, let's start first with the members of ISKCON. Once we imbibe the teachings of these books in our heart, and this, going back to your reference, Prabhu, is not just knowledge. Knowledge must translate into a technique. It must translate into something tangible. That's when it becomes realized knowledge. Now, given the fact that we have the advantage of devotees within ISKCON who come from so many varied backgrounds, with so many talents and skill sets, if everybody was to establish an internal balance of relationship with Krishna as the first thing, automatically then what happens really is all the skills and talents that we all have, we start engaging them practically in the service of Krishna. That's why you see this beautiful movement of ISKCON with so many projects, with so many activities happening. But the beginning is that we have to all individually imbibe Srila Prabhupada's teachings, get inspired, and then use our intelligence to engage. So, example, some devotees may engage themselves in business. Now, they may do business in various ways in the past, but once they come in touch with books of Srila Prabhupada, they're inspired to follow ethical business practices. And that's a great value addition to this world, the ethical business practices. So like this, we can see that the values that are being addressed here are truly what Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita gives. There's a very famous verse, and I could read you the translation, which all of us know very well. But I read that. This is Bhagavatam 1.2.9 in the translation. Prabhupada says, he says, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. In the secular world, when we talk about the word values, there are so many connotations that are given. But in the world of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, as you probably know better than me, it's that one essential relationship, which then manifests like a beautiful flower with so many petals in various ways. There are some other examples that I like to give the members of ISKCON and those who could be watching. This is a very simple example, but a very important one. Most of us who are trying to practice devotional service take these things for granted, or at least we sort of just rattle them out. And I like to run them through again. These are the 4 vows that we take, which is no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling. Now, believe it or not, these 4 activities by themselves create immense value in this world. Let's take the example of meat eating. Most devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness would not touch meat, what to say of eating it. But if you really look at environment analysis of ecology, what is going wrong, even the context of today's pandemic in the form of coronavirus, where did it come from? What is the most polluting part of industries? It's all got to do with animal killing and meat processing industry. Now, somebody outside will say, hey, what's the big deal? There are people who are vegetarian, but we like to eat meat. But we really have to see from the eyes of the scriptures to realize how much value this adds. And even if you look at it scientifically, because Prabhupada said, we are a scientific movement, this no meat eating itself can create immense value individually in elevating our consciousness, for our communities, in creating a very clean environment, a merciful environment, and it can save the planet. So at various levels of vision, if you were to look at it and analyze even these 4 basic principles that we follow every day in, day out, they create immense value. Much more than the so-called artificial value that most people will argue that they're creating through enterprises and they're creating through various social and sort of efforts and educational efforts.
Jai. Let me just. Okay, there we go. I want to make sure that. Oh, we got the echo still. All right, there we go. Okay. You're getting already coming into our next area, because we've gone from the education, systematic. We've talked about values of life, and this first purpose of ISKCON ends with an objective, a vision of achieving unity and peace in the world. So I'd like to hear you just tie this all back together. How do the education elements, the values elements, the systematic side of it, the imbalance, all of this, how does it end up with unity and peace in the world?
With unity and peace in the world, first I'll take your permission for a little bit indulgence. If you really look at the context in the 60s, we're looking at His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, even in the contemporary life, looking at least 2 world wars, right? We're looking at another context where there's another one going on with Vietnam. We look at another context where there's a Cold War going on at that point in time.
Now, we were warned about this by Tapan Mishra Prabhu. We're both in the same environment. He does not have an uninterruptible power supply connected to his internet, and so he lost. You might have seen the lights go out here. My lights go out, but my internet is here. But Tapan lost his internet. That means we don't see him. But I think we can still hear you. Is that correct, Tapan? Let's unmute you. Okay. Now his mic is muted. We will get power back, by the way. We're all on a generator here. So we hope to get some power back soon. See, he's using his backup internet, but now we have the power back, but we lost him. So this is Mayapur. Not perfect technology. There's something may happen. Let's see if I can help him out here. Just give me a second. Okay. All right, let's hope that he's able to get right back on. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, you have anything that you'd like to ask, to insert, please type them in the comment box. We're going to go for a full hour, and we're just halfway through. We're going to be moving on. We're talking now. We're mainly talking about getting into the purposes. And here he is back. And then we're going to get into. We got power back.
At least for the time being. So this is the mercy of Sridham Mayapur. We have to go on. So Prabhu, I was just giving a reference to the context at the time when unity and peace was being talked about, 2 world wars, then the Vietnam War, and so on and so forth. Now, it's not very different now. You know, if you really observe what's happening in the world today, we seem to be in one of the most chaotic periods, at least in the 30 years that I've been observing the world. It's a very, very chaotic period. You can take all the way from west all the way to far east, and there are hotspots. There are hotspots across all geographies where there's immense tension, immense conflict. Right? So the problem of peace and unity remains, or the need to have peace and unity remains even more relevant today. So it's not something that one can imagine and think, hey, listen, we are already not having war. So that's the first context I want to set.
What to speak of unity?
That's right. What to speak of unity? What to speak of unity?
Now we just. Okay, so I think we had a little. The power went on and off, but you're still here. Great.
Right. Okay. So now, in the context of how to achieve this real peace and unity, Srila Prabhupada, across all the documentation, you know, whether it's this purposes, the Constitution, the League of Devotees, prospectus, he has emphasized on this world, peace and unity. In his writings and his lectures and his books, Prabhupada has very much emphasized that the way to achieve peace and unity, we have to first start with the basic building block, which is individual building block. So the first block of this piece is us ourselves. Unless individually we are peaceful and happy, there is no scope for us to be collectively peaceful and happy. You know, take any unit, be it a family unit or be it a community unit. If the members are not happy, the unit or the community cannot be happy. And in order to be happy, Prabhupada has emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Ishopanishad, that we have to overcome this tendency of trying to grab and acquire what does not belong to us. Better still, the moment that we can start understanding, and Prabhupada says that this is divine knowledge, which is to see that everything belongs to Krishna. The moment a devotee or a member of ISKCON starts to see that, he becomes a rightful claimant for being peaceful, as described in the famous chapter verse in Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhidam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim rishyati. If we can establish that, then we're setting up the building blocks for a peaceful ISKCON and a peaceful society. Otherwise, it's only temporary. Everything is a temporary fix. Okay, you know, we make some arrangement. As long as I scratch your back, you scratch mine, we don't step onto each other's shoulders, we are peaceful. But the moment we see something which is from a material point of view, from a material vision that I like and you like at the same time, there is conflict, right? So this real peace and unity is the result that Srila Prabhupada wants for ISKCON to acquire, for ISKCON to create within its society of members and then in the whole world. Now, everybody who's present can really try and think along with me, what could be more ambitious? It's a very, very ambitious objective, a very, very ambitious vision, and it would require a thorough surrender for the members to be able to help Srila Prabhupada fulfill this. Once we start taking steps in that direction individually, then we can all start contributing to this real unity and peace. Otherwise, as we've observed, we have disturbances within the members of ISKCON, and we continue to, of course, have many disturbances around in the society. You also asked me, Prabhu, how does it tie up to the rest of the words? Education, systematic propagation, and values. Now, first, somebody who is of an elevated consciousness, who's Krishna conscious, has to reach out to members who are not and recruit such members, which is done through systematic propagation. Once the members are brought in, they have to be educated, they have to be trained, not only in knowledge, as you mentioned as one of the first words when we started this talk, but they have to then be taught the techniques through knowledge, through technique, through austerity, through following in the footsteps of previous acharyas, following the orders of the spiritual master, adopting what's given in Srila Prabhupada's books in our individual lives. We then start to acquire individual peace. And that then becomes a building block for peace in community. And Prabhupada said, if ISKCON can show an example through our communities of a peaceful and happy community, God-conscious community focused on serving Krishna and pleasing Krishna and showing that how all of its members can relate to each other without fighting, without grabbing onto each other's throats, then people and the whole world would be inspired to become part of this positive and most important alternative of becoming Krishna conscious.
I'd like to just spend a little more on this. So you did bring in the objective that this is not just peace for the world. It's also, it starts with peace within, and it extends then within our own society. When we don't have this peace amongst ourselves, would you tie it to this imbalance of values? Is it something wrong with our value system that generates this kind of lack of peace?
I would think so, yes, Prabhu. At least that's what it shows throughout Bhagavatam. Even if when we see conflicts, there are several natures of conflicts that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. Some of them are between the suras, those who are favorable towards Lord Vishnu and Lord Krishna, and the asuras, the demons. And that is one extreme. And we also notice that there are conflicts between the suras, those who are favorable towards Lord Vishnu, be it in the form of this conflict between Vritasura and Indra. Both are devotees, as per the purports of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. But there is an imbalance of values. Vritasura is described as one who's at a higher level of consciousness, much higher level of consciousness, and he transcends and goes back home, back to Godhead, and Indra remains here. So even amongst devotees, it is described in Srimad Bhagavatam, because we may be Kanishta Adhikaris, Madhyama Adhikaris, and Uttama Adhikaris, unless we progress from the stage of Kanishta to Madhyama Adhikaris, we would continue to have conflicts. It is only at the stage of a Madhyama Adhikari and above that the realm of conflict starts to dissolve, and the realm of loving devotional relationships amongst devotees starts to emerge. And then you go to the higher level of Uttama Adhikari, he sees everybody with love. So definitely, Prabhu, this is an imbalance of values. But the good part is we are all at least making an attempt to progress in that direction. And if we remain sincere, we will get there. Until we get there, we will continue to have some disturbances. Our hope is that with the passage of time and passage of practice of bhakti and sadhana bhakti, we would reduce such conflicts. So that's a short response, Prabhu, with respect to that part.
Thank you. Just I was thinking while we were talking about one value that Prabhupada emphasized in respect of our peace is this unity in diversity, the value of valuing diversity by maintaining unity. And in that respect, I was noting that in this first purpose of ISKCON, Prabhupada talks about God. Later, of course, the society is dedicated to Krishna consciousness, and the other 6 purposes are much more explicitly talking about Krishna. But in this first purpose, he uses the term God. And the techniques of spiritual life and so on. So, how do you see some sort of how you say interfaith concept here that this applies beyond the devotees of Krishna? I'm going to just for our reference, I'm going to put it up here so that we have.
Right. So, Prabhu, just with respectfully, the word God
actually
does not appear.
He doesn't even mention God. He doesn't.
Yeah,
he just
it's
spiritual life, spiritual. So
yes. So yes, Prabhu. So Prabhupada mentions the word spiritual, and Prabhupada was very clear. He mentioned very clearly that this movement, ISKCON, is actually not a sectarian movement. In various morning walks, lectures, whenever people will come forward and try to portray this as a Hindu movement, Srila Prabhupada will respond very forcefully by saying, this is not a sectarian movement. This is a scientific movement. So in being responsive, I would say that it's embedded. It's not sectarian. It's embedded. It's meant for everyone, irrespective of what religion, what faith one comes from. Because, as Prabhupada said, we are all originally Krishna conscious. We are all, sons of Krishna, and our relationship is with Krishna. The word interfaith, and does it give that connotation? Why is the word Krishna not used? Prabhu, you mentioned, maybe it's not mentioned the first purpose, but right above the first purpose, it says, 7 purposes, or the certificate for International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So, like you said, it's almost like obvious that this is in the context of creating Krishna consciousness. Now, is there an interfaith angle to it? Is there a view to bring in more people from various religious backgrounds? Of course, yes. But Prabhupada expected everybody to become God conscious. He expected everybody to follow the principles of loving relationship with God. That was very clear. So nowadays, the word interfaith may be used for various purposes. I mean, one definition of interfaith that is given is there is distinction made between interfaith and interreligious. Interfaith is specifically focused for the Abrahamic religions, that it is a forum where those of the Abrahamic religion come together, according to one definition. But Prabhupada was looking at much beyond. He was a visionary. He wanted everybody to participate, and he made that possible. In his presence, in Srila Prabhupada's presence itself, people from different walks of life, coming from different religious backgrounds, joined and became members of ISKCON and completely dedicated their lives for fulfilling the first purpose and the remaining 6 and everything else that Srila Prabhupada wanted to fulfill. So it wasn't just theory. He put forward the precept, he showed by his example as an acharya, and he made it a reality. He created the nucleus. He created that reaction which can now multiply across the world with his 108 centers and more now.
Right.
Hare Krishna.
We have just another 15 minutes or so, and we've spent a wonderful time going deeply into this first purpose of ISKCON. I hope that that all of you who are viewing and those who will view later on will have gained, as I have, a lot of insight, and hope that you will watch all of our sessions on this. But I'd like to move now more specifically into your service, because as we mentioned in the beginning, you're the director, executive director for the Ministry of Education. But you also said that ISKCON is itself an educational institution. So what is the role of the Ministry of Education within the society for ISKCON?
Right. So the role of Ministry of Education, and I serve along with Shesha Prabhu and other devotees who are also part of me. Shesha Prabhu is our minister. There are other devotees who are serving in the ministry. My answer would relate to what we shared in the beginning, Prabhu. When we're organizing something, there needs to be some structures, and within ISKCON, within the GBC body, various ministries have been created, committees have been created to basically take hold of certain areas that need to be developed. And in the context of the larger education movement that ISKCON is, and practically every devotee is a teacher. Every devotee, when he's sharing with somebody, something with someone, he takes the role of a teacher. But in that context, there are some functional activities that need to be undertaken. And that functional responsibility lies with the Ministry of Education. And I'll give you a few examples, Prabhu, of what services need to be undertaken. So about 2 years or 1.5 years back, when I was asked to take up this service, I felt that there are few areas that we really need to do, not only in this ministry, but every ministry that we have. And I'd like to list those out. And these become the functional nuts and bolts that need to be performed by the ministry. First of all, it must serve in connecting devotees together, especially the educators. So if we start with the very basic building block of educators, those who are teaching in our schools, universities, who are teaching various scriptural education programs, we should first do the service of bringing them together by connecting them to each other. We are distanced by geography, and sometimes we're also distanced by thoughts and values, as we discussed a little bit earlier. So we want to connect devotees together so that we can work efficiently. We don't reinvent the wheel. We are all working under tight resources, and we can utilize those resources efficiently to build wonderful educational programs. So that's first thing that the education ministry is trying to undertake. The second that we're trying to undertake is inform. We want to keep everybody updated on the various programs, various projects that are being launched around the world, and by the ministry itself. And for this, I would encourage everyone that you can please visit our platform iskoneducation.org, and there could be a link, Panchratna Prabhu, that you can share with everybody. Because what I'm sharing with you has already been embedded and translated into how we've structured our platform. So connecting devotees being first. The second is informing devotees. We inform devotees of what's happening, what are the best practices that are being created in different geographies in the field of education. And by doing so, we are able to encourage devotees. So second is inform. The third is we want to create learning programs. Learning programs essentially means training for devotees, for educators. And we are creating training for educators, be it teachers training, be it training on how to design your own curriculums, so on and so forth. So that not only those who are teaching in schools and in ISKCON schools, or who are teaching in Shastric education program, but even those who are giving seminars, giving classes on Bhagavatam, can possibly structure their education that they give every day. So the third aspect is learning for devotees through various programs. We are creating programs for children, for adults, especially in the area of scriptural education. And fourth is sharing resources. So we are trying to collect various curriculums. We have a library that I encourage everybody to become, to access and utilize. Now, these four functions by themselves, connecting devotees, informing devotees, sharing resources, as well as creating learning platform, is what the ministry is trying to do. To do what? In order to enable everybody to play their roles as educators more effectively. So that's the role that the ministry must perform, Prabhu, in the context of the larger educational movement.
So can you tell us about any specific programs that are you're focused on, say, for this year, and also maybe tie it into the change situation now that we're on spending most of our time, or a lot of our time, virtually in virtual association. So tell a little specific programs of the ministry that we might want to, our audience might like to connect with, and offerings that you're planning for this year.
There are several, but the one that I definitely would like to bring everybody's attention is a program that we call Books Are the Basis. This is a very important program, a very foundational and fundamental program. And the vision of this program, and I say the vision, is that Srila Prabhupada's books are the most widely read spiritual books in the whole world. That's the vision that we have. Our mission for this program is that we would like every member of ISKCON to read Prabhupada's books every day. Right? Now, one may ask, okay, how is this going to change? What change is this going to bring about? Well, it's going to bring about unity in diversity by thoroughly reading Prabhupada's books, hearing it amongst devotees. There'll be change of consciousness through the process of Shravan and Kirtan. It is going to create an environment of loving relationships. It's going to create an environment whereby together we'll be able to overcome all the differences that arise. And as with joint hands, we will be able to realize the vision of Srila Prabhupada's books being the most widely spiritual literature in the world. What are we doing for this? When we wanted to launch this program, we approached the GBC body. We got the blessings of the GBC body to have 1 week on the ISKCON calendar dedicated completely for emphasizing on reading Prabhupada's books. So one may ask, but hey, Prabhu, we have this every day in our temples and centers. Yes, we do. But what's going to happen differently, and we would like to happen differently, during that 1 week, every devotee, every leader especially, is going to emphasize. We're going to establish more reading clubs. These could be online reading clubs, Pancharatna Prabhu, as we have established now. And we are going to create a culture where devotees are encouraged by the leaders to read every day in the company of the leaders, inspired by the leaders. I encourage you that if you go to our website, there's a section called Basis, where we are creating foundational blocks. On the Basis section, you will find number one, philosophies of education, which we're collecting from experienced educators who have lived 30, 40 years teaching in the ISKCON. Then the second is this project called Books Are the Basis. This is where I really feel that we can make a huge difference, especially if the educators start reading this, the teachers start reading this, the members start reading this every day, Srila Prabhupada's book, then they will start translating it into various spheres of life. So this happens to be Prabhu one program, and there are several more that I would encourage devotees to visit our website, look at it, and go through it. And if you're interested, please write to us so that we can be of service.
So on that account, then, what are, I think you've mentioned this program. This is a way that everyone in the movement can participate. How do devotees connect? They write to you? Or give us a little more background, and how can the listeners, the viewers here, connect with the ministry and participate in your work?
So the ministry has created resources for this program. This program can be implemented in our local communities, Prabhu. So it's not necessary that you have to come and interact with the ministry, but let's say you have your congregation, you have your temple. If you go to our website, to this section called Books Are the Basis, we've created 7, 8 resources which you can use, how to conduct study groups, a beautiful book of quotes on emphasizing on reading Prabhupada's books every day. We're building a training seminar on what should be the mood and attitude and techniques of reading Srila Prabhupada's books systematically, relating to the systematic propagation, so on and so forth. We have created posters for you, which you can use and implement in your local communities. At the same time, if you feel inspired that you want to share more resources with us, something that you're doing in this regard with us, or you want to participate with the ministry in marketing this program, sharing with us how we can improve this program, then you can connect with us through the website, through our email address, through our office, and we would like to engage with you. Currently, many devotees are engaged with us. Over this whole COVID-19 period, we managed to encourage tens and hundreds of programs where devotees now reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day. They're using their Zoom channels, Skype channels, etc., and establishing more and more programs. On the page itself, you'll see at least 20 programs in different languages which happen every day. So like that, Pancharatna Prabhu, it can be multiplied. And by the way, you are aware, Pancharatna Prabhu, and many devotees may not be. If you read the resolution, you'll find the historical context as well. It was felt by the leaders of ISKCON that this happens to be the most important thing that the leadership can do, which is to once again refocus the energy of the members in reading Prabhupada's books and appreciating what's written, because it was felt even amongst the leadership that the readership has not been very high. I'll give you my personal example as well. Services take on life. We have several of us, all of us have many services, and before we know, life is consumed by services. Some of us like to read, the others are not such avid readers, and before we know, months have passed. We just participate in the class, but months have passed before we've actually read systematically, day after day. So when this period of COVID happened, I took this opportunity right before Gaur Purnima. I said, hey, listen, something is coming. I feel I'm going to be stationed in Sridham Mayapur. I may not have to travel. And I decided that I'm going to read every day. So despite my initial troubles of the mind and not being able to sit in one place, I made it a point that I'm going to sit with Srimad Bhagavatam, start from the very beginning for 2 hours every day, come whatever. This is my sadhana. So I chant and then I read 2 hours. And by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, in the past 4.5 months, I started from the first page, first word, and now I'm on the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I never thought in my life that I would be able to do this. But I felt that if I'm going to talk about this, I might as well do it myself. And I feel blessed. I feel blessed. I just feel, why didn't I do this more often? And I feel that now it's going to become part of my life. So our intention is through various other speakers, various other programs, learning programs that we're creating, that all of you would be able to engage in similar reading of Srila Prabhupada's books every day, be it a couple of pages, a few hours, depending upon your circumstances, but do engage.
Jai, thank you, thank you. Yes, that is a good place to end up, because it's something that everyone can do and should be doing, and hopefully mostly are doing, and will then just take it as an impetus to increase, to add on, so that we make this, like you say, a very core part of our nutritional program, as well as we don't miss eating.
Yes, and do you know another very interesting point, if I may take half a minute more?
Yes.
Is that in the purposes, if we read, and also the Constitution, other documents, Prabhupada has selectively used the word society and people at large, or the world at large, at least in the Constitution. And some things he refers to the society, to the members. If we're able to do this, Prabhu, then the first line of the first purpose, systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society, which is ISKCON and all of us, would start in all earnest.
Yes, yes, we are a society with a capital S. Okay, so we didn't have much. We didn't get comments with questions, and I didn't also push for that, except for my friend Nishingananda, who's. I'll just share this because it's humorous. I know this is tongue in cheek, but he says, "Thank you, Nishingananda, for tuning in."
My Dhanvat to Nishingananda Prabhu.
Nishingananda is just giving us some impetus, but thank you very much for tuning in, and it's a great way to end. So
well, we can extend one request to Narasimhananda Prabhu, because he's tuned in, that he can request all the Sabha members to read every day and inspire all of us to read.
Yes, Nishingananda is the chair of the spiritual advisor spiritual Bhagavad Assembly. Anyway, spiritual advisors Bhagavad Assemblies. That's what I believe. Anyway, Sabha. Hare Krishna. So thank you very, very much. ISKCONeducation.org. While it's right there in your screen, click. Well, you can't click on the video, but type it in. It's not too many words, and go on there. Get on the list. Learn about all the different programs, and be part of the service. I'd like to recapping what you mentioned, that the ministry is there to inform, which is really necessary. We all need to learn about what's going on, to train us in and to give us resources. And there was one more.
There is inform, there is connect, there is share, and there is creating a learning platform. Yes.
Connect us together. So let's do it. Thank you very much,
There is one parting word, if you allow me, couple of sentences I'd like to say with respect to the purposes. I've noticed in my own personal life that whenever we talk about the purposes for ISKCON, we often think about it in the form of something for the society. I repeat myself. We think about it once in a year, something that the society has to accomplish. On the other hand, I felt in my meditation, because I was asked to speak here, I felt that each of these purposes are actually for us individually.
Yes, yes.
It is not for somebody out there. There's a very old, very, very old poster. When I was growing up, my sister had a poster in the room. And that poster said, everyone thought that somebody would do it and nobody did. I repeat, everyone thought that somebody would do it and nobody did. But we have to start meditating on these purposes in our individual capacity. That's when they will become relevant to us. That's when they will become alive. And that's when we'll get the potency to be able to translate it into something for ISKCON. So let's not wait for it to be done by someone and the society at large, but let's start adopting these as our purposes of life, our way of serving and pleasing Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
That's what we call shared vision. When it's my vision, it's your vision, it's our shared vision.
Unity in diversity. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.